Thank you, trustees, for joining online. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. This is a special AFPEC meeting. We will start the meeting with land acknowledgement. I would like everyone to stand up. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Thank you very much. We'll go to agenda. Since this is a special meeting, we don't need to approve the agenda, right? Item number 2, declarations of possible conflict of interest. Any trustees? Hearing none. Item number 3, delegations. Do we have any delegations?
Chair, there are written delegations that have been circulated to the committee, no in-person delegations.
Thank you. We'll move to item number 4, which is staff reports. 4.1, contract awards and operations. Staff, who's going to speak on this?
Thank you, and through the chair, I will turn this over to Senior Manager Ferris, but before I do, I just wanted to recognize that this is Senior Manager Ferris's last FEC meeting before his retirement.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was asking how many years it has been, and Chris, maybe you can let us know. We were guessing between 20 and 30.
32 plus.
Wow.
Wow, so just wanted to publicly take an opportunity to thank Chris for everything that he does for us and to wish him best in the retirement and give trustees an opportunity to acknowledge him as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. On behalf of trustees, I would like to thank you. Go ahead. Who's that?
Sorry, that was Trustee Arts. I just said thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Who's speaking on 4.1?
Thank you, everyone. And through you, Mr. Chair, on this evening's contract awards report operations, we have 3 items in Appendix A that are here for the information of the committee. I have 1 item on Appendix B that will require the committee's approval this evening. And on Appendix C, we have 3 items that will eventually require board approval following recommendation by committee tonight. And as always, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about any of the items on tonight's report.
Thank you, Senior Manager Ferris. Trustees, anyone has a question? Go ahead, Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much. I know it's just here for information, but I was interested in the premium support services for Power School. Over the course of the transition to Power School, there have been some issues, obviously, and I'm wondering how staff feel that this specialist would actually help to mitigate future issues. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Executive Officer Singh to address the question.
Thank you, Chris. Chris, we're going to miss you, and I personally going to miss you. Thank you for years and years of service and the collaboration we have enjoyed over the years at so many tables. Thank you for your service.
Thanks, Peter.
Through you, Madam Chair, this person that we're trying to onboard from Power School is to mitigate future challenges, as we have brought the, I will call, out-of-the-box functionality running up and running in TDSB now for over a year and a half. As we look at the future, we will also like to tweak the Power School platform to fit our needs. We believe this individual will be the key person for helping us now tweaking that environment. And I won't use the word customization, but realigning the platform to our needs. So with the previous platform, Trillium, we had Trillium over 20 years. So over 20 years, we had modified that platform to fit into how TDSB operates. So now is our opportunity to do similar things with the Power School over coming years. This technical person will be the one providing that kind of guidance for us. Thank you. Back to the floor.
Thank you very much for that, through you, Mr. Chair. I too would like to take this opportunity I'd like to have a lot more questions to ask you, but I actually don't. So I don't want to waste that time, but I do want to sincerely thank you for your years of service, for your commitment to the board, for your innovation and your collaboration during some difficult contract negotiations, and just sincerely appreciate your willingness to take the time to explain when we do have questions. And I only wish you the best on your retirement. I'm missing a principal in one of my schools. If you might consider coming back, please know you're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. And we have Trustee Alexis Dawson. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have a question about Power School as well. I just wanted to understand, again, I think that I've probably asked this before, but the transition to Power School, was that, I know Trillium was phased out, but was Power School chosen by the ministry? And if so, are they offering additional support?
Through you, Madam Chair, the Power School and other SAS platforms, that choice was left to individual school boards to decide which paths to take. There is no support from the ministry for the platform itself. Every school board has been left alone how they will like to proceed. And there were three actually SAS platforms. Those are popular in Ontario. We went with the one that already was established in Ontario market.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Do you have anything else? Thank you. Can I have a... Trustee Arad, go ahead.
Thank you, and my apologies for background noise. I wanted to ask around the math software that was featured in the materials for this. I wanted to get a bit more background information on that program and about and just a better understanding of how many students are likely to be able to use it and how that access for the students is determined. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Staff?
Sorry, through the chair, can I get clarification on which software?
The math.
The Mathology?
Mathology.
I was just looking to see who, sorry, through the chair, I was looking to see who is online who might be able to help with that, and I don't have anyone from that area who assisted with the Mathology procurement, so I might have to take any questions you have specifically back and get back to you on that. Good.
Through the chair.
There's Murphy, sorry.
Centrally
I didn't
assigned.
see you there.
Who is this? Can you identify?
Chair.
Murray? Go ahead, Murray.
Through the chair, it's Murphy Sallow, coordinating principal.
Hi, thank you. Mary Sallow, centrally assigned principal, whose portfolio includes mathematics. So Mathology is a tool that provides support to our schools, and the licenses are first being offered to the ministry identified math priority schools, as we are supporting those schools moving forward in terms of their math achievement in a number of ways. And this is one of several tools that are available to them. In terms of the exact number of students, I would have to get back to the trustees around that in terms of looking at the total number of licenses calculation. But it is a significant number of students, and it also provides a number of additional resources that are provide culturally responsive math stories and other tools that are a little bit different from some of the other tools we have available to the system. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thanks very much. That's extremely helpful and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Arad. Do you have anybody else? Can we have a mover and seconder for this item? Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Thank you, database. So we have mover and seconder. Are we voting online or?
Hastings, yes.
Shan in favor.
Hassan in favor.
Arts in favor.
McLean in favor.
And that's carried. Thank you very much. Before we move to item 4.2, trustees who joined late, can you identify yourself, please?
Trustee Shan here.
Thank you, Trustee San.
Trustee Dawson.
Trustee Earhart.
Thank you. Moving on.
Hastings,
Item number 4.2, contract awards facilities. City Manager Ferris.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, on this evening's contract awards facilities report, we have 34 items in Appendix A for information, 21 items requiring committee approval this evening, and Appendix C has 34 items requiring board approval. And before I open the floor to questions, I want to make a correction on item 32 in Appendix A, the electric truck rental item. There's an error in the costing. That costing was for the full amount of trucks that we went out to proposal on and the full term of 4 years, whereas we're proposing a rental term of 1 year for 4 vehicles. So the actual cost on the report should be $60,000, not $491,160. So I hope that makes a lot more sense to everyone who is looking at that. It is $60,000.
Thank you for that clarification. Go ahead, Trustee Laskin.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can I assume that the projects here are not included in the 4.4 status report update because they haven't been approved, or are they included?
Thank you. Through the chair, Trustee Laskin, they should be included in there because that list that's in the major capital and renewal report update includes projects that are planned or underway over $10,000.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I just wondered.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Anyone online has any question before we move forward?
Oh, Trustee Earhart.
Go ahead, Trustee Earhart.
Thank you, and I apologize. I'm on my mobile because my my computer's reloading, so my apologies for any confusion here. I wanted to ask. This is the facilities report. I wanted to ask about some of the projects for proposal within the ward I represent. I must say I'm very excited about the scope and scale of these projects, but I do want to make sure for a few, they may require some existing services that would operate in the summer months to either be closed or relocated. So I'm looking to get a better understanding of those. One in particular was for Duke of Connaught School. I noticed the delegation that came in is from Apple Grove Community Complex. I'm the appointed trustee that sits on the Apple Grove Board of Management on behalf of trustees for the Toronto District School Board. And that program has been operational at Duke of Connaught for 30 years. They're located in the basement. They run a very popular summer program, one of the more affordable summer programs in the community I represent. That facility also houses a city-owned community center, S.H. Armstrong, as well as a Wood Green Children's Services Center. So just using that one school as an example, if for any reason there had to be a closure in operations over the summer, well, it wouldn't affect direct TDSB programs. It could be hundreds of children in a catchment that would be without summer care. And so we are looking to better understand what the impacts would be, is to find other programming to accommodate the hundreds of students that may be impacted could be significant. So just wondering if staff have any insights on Duke of Connaught in particular, or any of the other schools. I saw Franklin on the list and Queen A as well, with some fairly substantial operation proposals that may require summer closures. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Arrowhead.
Through the chair. So Trustee Earhart, that's a great question, and it's one that occupies our minds all the time when we're planning these major renewal projects. Many of these projects are very technically challenging, and it is difficult indeed to do the work while the school is occupied, be it with students or in the summer. The main concern is, of course, asbestos removal. We try not to do major asbestos removal in a building while it's occupied, which means we really have very little time in which we can do that work and get that done and out of the way, and then we can begin doing other work and do that phased around the occupants in the building. But at this point, I'm not sure we're in a position to be able to say exactly what the impact will be at the schools that you mentioned. I know these are very big projects, and they're quite they touch every aspect of the school. So we're going to have a look at that and see, what can we do to mitigate the impact. I also say that we have traditionally worked with programs that or organizations that are using our schools during the summer to find them nearby alternative sites that are safe to occupy and provide similar amenities, and we try to facilitate that move as much as we can to minimize disruption. It's just the nature of some of these projects. It's very difficult to do them when the building is occupied. So we'll provide more detail about those specific schools. We do that with all our schools that are undergoing these kinds of major retrofits, and we try to do it as quickly as we can. Now that we have the contractor on board, that helps us to understand how the contractor would structure the work and do the scope, and then we would follow up and get back to the schools.
Thank you, Maya. Trustee Herod, do you have follow-up? Trustee Herod?
Thanks very much. My apologies. That's helpful. I think I'm supportive. I'm very supportive of this work. It's going to be a benefit to all the students who occupy these buildings, and their updates that have been needed for a very, very long time. But I do share the concerns that staff have just expressed, and particularly regarding the risks of asbestos abatement in some of these circumstances. I would say that for a Duke of Connaught school in particular, where we receive the delegation, I would flag it would not just be Apple Grove, that there could be a potential, depending on the nature of abatement, because there are two other entities. We are talking about 300 young people a week that are in that facility from the point of school closure to the point of school reopening. So we'll want to really put our minds together quickly, as usually the plans for city centers, I know, can be as much as a year in advance for the childcare center, because they have licensure requirements for outdoor spaces, et cetera, that can sometimes be hard to meet in locations, as well as Apple Grove, which has an early on center, their summer camps, their seniors programming that they operate throughout the summer. It's a lot of users we'll need to consider. And so we're now at, we likely have some leasing requirements in our agreements. Just from a practical perspective, for the scale of the community impact, 6 months is we're at 6 to 7 months potentially. It's not leaving a lot of time. And so I'm hopeful for that one, that we can set up a community group right away to start considering the scope and scale of impacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Arrowhead.
Through the chair, certainly, we will endeavor to get that organized as soon as possible, recognizing that also some of these projects may span more than 1 year of construction. So there may be work that's done this summer and then work that's done next summer, and how through that flow through maybe, provide, still be able to allow people to occupy the building. So we have to look at that in detail. And we'll get back to the school community as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a mover and seconder for this item, 4.2? Trustee Laskin.
Arts.
Trustee Arts, thank you. Okay. Can we have a show of hands for this item, please? Trustee Laskin in favor. TDSB is in favor.
Arts in favor.
McLean in favor.
Hastings in favor.
Trustee Hassan.
Hassan in favor.
Hastings isn't a member of the committee.
Okay, thank you. Is it carried? Yes. Thank you. Moving along, item number 4.3. If you look at your agenda item, there should be a PowerPoint presentation on actual enrollment as of September 2023. Who's speaking on this?
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm going to turn it over to System Officer Andrew Gowdy. Before I do, I just wanted to acknowledge the work of his team. Prior to the pandemic, we've always been sort of within 1%, and when you think about that, a 1% difference on 200 almost 50,000 students is a pretty significant accomplishment. The pandemic created some challenges for predicting enrollment, but we are back within 1% again. And again, that's a testament to the work that Andrew and his team do. So just wanted to acknowledge that before I turn it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Associate Director. We've got a slide deck that's going to appear on the screen. I wish to say good evening to the trustees and staff and members of the public who are watching and listening. I am joined this evening by Nahama Hirschberg, who's online, and Nahama is our Manager of Enrollment and Planning Services. So through the chair, this evening we're presenting our report on actual enrollment as of this September. This is a report that we present to FBEC every year at this time, and the purpose of the report is to indicate how we are performing this September with actual enrollment, to compare it to the projected enrollment that we had calculated for this September, and also to compare it to our historical enrollment. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'm going to comment on our enrollment by panel, starting with elementary and then going to secondary and providing you with the system totals. And then for each panel, I'm going to provide the projected enrollments and the actual enrollments and provide some comments on the trends that we see. And then we're presenting some information on schools that are over and under projection. Next slide, please. So in terms of the annual process that we go through with enrollment, we do a system enrollment projection each year in November, and that's forecasting an enrollment for the upcoming school year. That enrollment projection is provided to the ministry. It also goes to the trustee at the FBAC meeting in January. In December through to February, we calculate school by school enrollment projections. And those projections are used in allocating budgets and teaching staff to schools. Once the new school year begins in September, we collect enrollment each week. And we monitor those enrollments. And what we're doing is we're comparing those weekly enrollments in September to the projections for September. And we're making realignments to resources based upon the actual number of students that have materialized. After September, we collect enrollment at each month end. The enrollment reports are available on TDSB web. This presentation tonight is commenting on the actual enrollments as of September 30th. So it's important to be aware that there is always variance between our actual and projected enrollments. There's always going to be some difference between the two. And at the system level, we're generally within 1%. That's our target, as Associate Director Zucker mentioned. Next slide, please. So before I launch into it, I just want to explain that there's 3 types of enrollments that school boards typically use. First, there's head count, which is self-evident. That's counting every individual student as one, and that's typically used in demographic studies where we want to compare and contrast enrollment of the school board or a school with population counts and population forecasts. The second type of enrollment is full-time equivalent. That is counting the number of students registered in a school by the amount of time that they're registered for instruction. So if a student is registered for half a day of instruction, they're counted as 0.5. And full-time equivalent enrollments are used in allocating resources to schools like teaching staff. The third type of enrollment is the average daily enrollment. This is a type of enrollment that's used by the Ministry of Education, and it's used for setting the budgets in the grants for student needs. The average daily enrollment is calculated as the average of the full-time equivalent enrollments collected on October 31st and March 31st of each school year. The average daily enrollment, and it's important to note, will show as a lower figure than the head counts and the full-time equivalents. And that's because enrollment typically declines slightly throughout a school year between October and March. And also, more importantly, the average daily enrollment figures do not include international students. Those figures are reported separately to the Ministry of Education. So when Business Services presents reports on budget that reference enrollments, they're typically referencing the average daily enrollment. Next slide, please. So this presentation will be speaking to headcount enrollments, beginning with elementary. The graph on the slide before us shows the actual enrollments for the elementary panel, JK to 8, from 2006 to 2023, and the actual enrollments are the red columns. What we're also showing for 2023 is the projected enrollment that we calculated last school year for this September. And from this graph, you can see that the blue column is slightly below the red column. So the projected enrollment that we had calculated was 162,648, and we came in above that projection. We came in at 163,350. So our actual enrollment came in above projection by approximately 700 students. We're above projection by approximately 0.4%. Now, when we compare the actual enrollment for 2023 to the actual enrollment for last year, that's the red column for 23 compared to the red column for 2022, we grew as the elementary panel from last year. We grew by 677 students. We grew by approximately 0.4%. Next slide, please. This graph shows the same actual enrollments from 2006 to 2023, but what we've done is we've added the projected enrollments for each school year. And the purpose of this graph is just to show the variance that we typically encounter. So this year we are above projection by about 0.43%, and that's very comparable to how we've performed in the past. The average from 2006 to 2019 was 0.47%. During the pandemic years, there was a great uncertainty as to what the enrollment trends were, and we were above or below projection by more than 3%. So we've returned now to trends that we've experienced in the past. Next slide, please. This slide shows our actual enrollment as of September 30th, and it breaks down the enrollment by in-person and virtual, and also by grade. It's here for our reference. I'll just point out a couple numbers. In terms of the virtual classes, we came in below projection. So there's 200 fewer students attending the virtual program than we were projecting, but there's more students attending in person. I just want to point out too that the total enrollments shown at the bottom of the slide, they show that the increase in enrollment has occurred pretty much across every grade. But junior kindergarten, we came in below projection. And I'd just like to point out that the kindergarten cohort is 15,011, and that's a smaller cohort that's entering the system now. So Toronto has a declining preschool age population. There's fewer births, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, and 3-year-olds in the city of Toronto at this time. So you can see that that JK cohort of 15,000 is smaller than the other cohorts, which are above 16,000 for the most part. Next slide, please. So in terms of the of comments on our actual enrollment as of this September, we went through 2 years of decline with the pandemic, and then last year we saw an increase. So last year was our first year of increase, and it was largely due to a high number of newcomers arriving to Toronto. So Canada has increased its immigration targets and is welcoming more immigrants than ever before in the past. And Toronto is a place that a large number of settling. So we did see an increase last year, largely due to newcomers. The projection that we prepared for this year, it looked at pre-pandemic trends and then rolled them forward to this year. It factored in a smaller junior kindergarten cohort based upon the declining preschool age population in Toronto. And our actual enrollment is showing that those assumptions have held true for the most part. Next slide, please. So the explanation for this year's growth in enrollment really comes down to the high level of immigration. We've welcomed a larger number of newcomers into the TDSB. And that group of newcomers also includes a larger number of refugees. So to give you an example of how our refugee intake has changed, in 2018-19, before the pandemic, there were 971 refugees who arrived over a year. In 2022-23, up to this October, 2,200 have arrived. So we've basically doubled in the number of refugees that we're welcoming. Next slide, please. This slide shows the number of schools that are above or below projection by 25 students or more. And we're showing the counts of these schools from 2009 to 2023. So this is another way of looking at variance. The number of schools that are over and under projection by at least 25 is shown in the right column. That's 2023. And this year we are experiencing the same degree of variance that we have pre-pandemic. If you look at 21 and 2022, you can see that we had a large number of schools that were off projection. But this year, we've returned to a similar trend that we've experienced pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. This map shows the locations of the schools that are over projection by 25 students or more. We have looked at the data in the student information system in terms of entry codes and departure codes. We've also consulted with these principals. And the most common explanation for why these schools are coming in over projection are more newcomers arriving in these schools' catchment areas, more families moving into the neighborhoods, and then more families living in condo units and apartment units. Many of those large blue dots are serving neighborhoods that have a large number of apartment units located within them. Next slide, please. This map shows the location of the elementary schools that have come in below projection by 25 students or more. And the most common explanation for why these schools have come in below projection are there's more families moving out of Toronto. Some of these schools serve highly transient communities that have a higher degree of unpredictability. So it's very challenging to forecast those schools' enrollment projections. And then several of these schools are serving new developments that have not generated the children that we are anticipating at this time. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the entry codes. It's another way of looking at the reasons why our enrollment is changing. So we have a student information system, and when new students are registered, the office staff enter in a code. And these codes are the codes that are most commonly used. There's many more codes than this. So we're showing the codes from 2018 to 2023. And the codes that I guess I'd like to point out, first it's the beginner at the top, which is the junior kindergarten kids. And for 2023, the beginners are 15,408. And this is down from what you can see in the past. And this is due to the declining preschool age population in Toronto. The other figure that I want to point out is the number of arrivals from other country in 2023. So that number is 3,623. And that number is higher than previous years. So it's approximately the same level as last year. Last year was the first year that we saw this surge in newcomers. And that surge in newcomers has continued this year, which is higher than we've received in the past. Next slide, please. This slide shows departure codes. So when a student leaves a school, the office staff enter in a code explaining the departure. And here I'd like to point out the number of departures who are going to other boards. So in 2023, there was 4,111 departures to other boards. And this is down from what we saw in the pandemic. So that first year of the pandemic in 2021, we saw a peak in students leaving Toronto to other school boards. It was 7,422. So we've returned to a level that we've experienced in the past in terms of the outmigration from Toronto for these younger families of elementary aged kids. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move on to the secondary panel. And this first graph, it's laid out the same way as the elementary graph that I spoke to. We're showing the actual enrollments at the red columns from 2006 to 2023. And we've got the projection for 2023 as the blue column. And for September, we were projecting 73,069 students. We came in above projection at 74,222. So the secondary panel came in above projection by 1.58%. When we compare the actual enrollment for this September to last year's actual enrollment, we have grown as the secondary panel. We grew by 1,750 students. So that's an increase of 2.4%. Next slide, please. This graph shows how actual and projected enrollment have compared going back to 2006. So this year we were above projection by 1.58%. Is higher than we typically are. The average from 2006 to 2019 was 0.7%. There were some more uncertainties at the secondary level in our projection. Next slide, please. This slide breaks down the secondary enrollment as of September 30th by in-person and virtual, as well as by age. And what I'd like to point out here is that the virtual school has maintained its enrollment. It actually came in above projection by 204 students, which is different than what we observed in elementary, where elementary virtual came in below projection. I'd also like to point out the bottom third of the table, the total enrollment by age. So we came in 1,153 students above projection. And if you look at the difference by the age cohorts, you can see that every age cohort, the 15-year-olds through to the 21-plus-year-olds, all came in above projection. The 14-year-olds came in below projection. But if you look at 18-year-olds to 21-plus-year-olds, that's 674 students. So that's 50% of that growth that we experienced was in these older age cohort. So this is a bit of a different trend than we've experienced. In the projection that we calculated, we actually were forecasting the 18 to 21-year-olds to decline, and that has been a trend for the last decades, that fewer students have been returning for a fifth year and beyond. But this year, we saw the first increase in the number of 18-year-olds and above returning for more than the 4 years. Next slide, please. So in terms of comments on our trend in secondary enrollment, the explanation is the older students, the 18-year-olds to 20-plus-year-olds that I just spoke to. That trend is different than what we factored into the projection. But the other explanation for our growth is, again, it's the immigration, the same explanation for elementary. We have welcomed a larger number of newcomers and refugees to the secondary panel. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the number of schools that were over or under projection by at least 25 students. And we're showing the numbers from 2009 to 2023. 2023 is on the right-hand side. And we had 42 schools that were off projection by at least 25. And it's similar to the variance that we've experienced in the past. Next slide, please. This map shows the locations of the secondary schools that were above projection by 25 students or more. And the explanations for most of these schools are that they've welcomed more newcomers, that there are fewer students leaving the neighborhood to attend other schools than in the past, and there's more families moving into the neighborhood. Next slide, please. This map shows the location of schools that were under projection by 25 students or more. And the most common explanations for these schools' trends are there's more students choosing to attend other schools than they've experienced in the past, and there's more families moving out of the area. Next slide, please. This table summarizes the entry codes, and we're looking at 2018 to 2023. And the figure I think I'd like to point out to you is the other country. The number of arrivals from other country in 2023, it was 2,167, and that is a higher number than we've experienced in the past. And this is reflective of the increase in immigration that Canada, Ontario, and Toronto are experiencing. Next slide, please. This table summarizes the departure codes. And there's one figure I'd like to point out, and that's the number of students who are leaving the TDSB to other boards. So that's the second row. And in 2023, we did experience an increase. We had 1,300 students that left the TDSB in the secondary panel to other boards. We've delved into that number. Those students have not left us to go to the Toronto Catholic District School Board. They've left us to go to other school boards in Ontario, so outside of Toronto. The Toronto Catholic District School Board is actually experiencing a very similar enrollment trend to us. So like us, they came in above projection and they've grown this year compared to last year, but they too have remarked upon the number of students that have left their system to go to other boards in Ontario. Next slide, please. Now I'll present the system totals. Next slide. These are the aggregates of the elementary and secondary panels. This graph is showing the actual enrollments from 2006 to 2023 and comparing 2023 to the projected enrollment, the blue column. And we grew from projection by 1,855 students, so that's a 0.79% difference from projection. And as a system, when we look at 2023 enrollment compared to last year's enrollment, we've grown as a system. We've grown by 2,427, so that's a 1% increase. Next slide, please. This graph shows the actual versus projection for all years back to 2006. And as a system, we were within the 1%. We were above projection by 0.79%. Next slide, please. And this table breaks down our system enrollment. On one slide, it shows the elementary enrollment and the secondary enrollment, as well as the system totals. It breaks it down by in-person and virtual, and this is a handy reference. And this concludes our presentation. We'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, System Officer Andrew Gowdy. Before we move on to questions, any trustees who have joined us?
Rachel Cherneslin has joined. Thanks.
Thank you,
Through the chair,
trustee.
Trustee Nunziata has joined.
Thank you, Patrick Nunziata.
Williams, I've been here since the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. All right, we have a... Yes.
2 questions.
Yeah. Trustee Laskin, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, I have a few questions. The first one is, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, I'm not sure if this is a question for Mr. Gowdy or staff in finance, but can you tell us, with the increase of 2,427 headcount over projection, what the net positive is to the overall budget?
So thank you, and through the chair, I will start, and then I will ask Executive Officer Snyder if he would like to add anything. We are working through the revised estimates currently, just finalizing the financial statements from the year previously. And so we will have the answer to that in January.
Okay.
For sure. We know that when we have an increase in enrollment, there is obviously an increase in grants. A lot of times there are increase in costs associated. So I know that you asked for the net. So that's what we're working on currently, and should be able to provide that in January. But I'd ask Executive Officer Snyder if he'd like to add anything.
No, thank you. Through you, Chair. I think that would be an accurate assessment. We have to do the full analysis to provide a net impact to the board.
And that comes in January, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. A corollary question then associated with the funding. Do refugee students come with additional supports? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and through the chair. So when a student comes from another country, part of the ESL grant does provide additional funding, supplemental funding on top of the Pupil Foundation funding. So yes, there is additional funding if they come before October 31st. And I think that that's an important
distinction.
Yeah, because anybody who came after November 1st, we won't receive the funding. We will receive funding for those students, but it won't come until the next year, because there's a 4-year sort of sliding scale that starts to happen as of October 1st. So, or sorry, October 31st. So it will be, yes, is the answer. Those September students will have had additional funding and usually have additional resources that are required to support them and ensure that the transition is as best as possible for those students.
Thank you. Then through you, Mr. Chair, when that report comes to us in January, can you highlight that section of it? Because we may want to advocate, especially to the federal government, that additional funding comes sooner than having to wait a whole year, as we have to spend those resources in the school year to support the students. So if it can just get separated out to make it easy for us to understand, would appreciate that.
Thank you, through the chair, no problem. And in the past, when we had a large contingent of Syrian newcomers that came, we did have some supplemental funding.
And the Roma.
Yes, refugees. So during that period. So I think that is something that we'd like to put on their radar.
Wonderful. And then my last question is, can I assume when you separate out other boards, you're only talking, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Mr. Gowdy, through you, Mr. Chair, that you're only talking about the other boards that are the approved public or separate boards that are funded by the province of Ontario? Or would that include things like the Board of Jewish Education?
Through the chair, it's the other publicly funded boards, the 72 school boards.
Thank you. Then is there a distinction made in the coding of private school for parochial schools, for religious schools? Is there a distinction?
Through the chair, the codes that are used for schools are actually school names. So we have to go to another step to identify what organization the school is associated with. So we have identified the other public school boards, but when it comes to the private schools, we've lumped them all together essentially. So it would take a greater investigation to differentiate types of private schools.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I really don't want to add to staff's burden, but anecdotally, we're hearing people leaving our system. I'm certainly hearing of Jewish families leaving our system. And I wondered if through that data that could be corroborated. So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll leave it to you to discuss with staff. Again, I know we're still dealing with a lot of extra things like the Auditor General and other issues, but I would, if I got raw data, I'd be happy to do the calculations myself and not add to staff's burden. But I really would like some way to substantiate that anecdotal information. And there could be other groups of culture or religious families that maybe perceive our system as not safe for those students and maybe leaving them for other more parochial schools as opposed to for-profit private schools. And I think that would be good data for us to have. So I'll leave it with you, Mr. Chair, to discuss with staff. And I really appreciate, again, the work of planning. It's outstanding work. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. We have Vice Chair Davidis. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. First of all, I want to congratulate staff on the report. Having been involved in projects that deal with thousands of people and understanding how difficult it is to have accuracy to within 1%, and then seeing the work that's happening in hundreds of thousands of students, and we can still hit those type of targets. I just want to sort of pause for a second to say that I appreciate the difficulty of the task. A couple of questions related to new students and the sort of changes in immigration policy and what that means for the City of Toronto and for our schools. Because I remember asking the question last year around how are we going to be able to determine a new pattern, increase in immigration, when we don't have a real president, or at least a modern president. I mean, we can go back to 1910s for last time we saw this size, scale, immigration wave comparative to the current population. Does the current year provide some illumination as to what may occur next year if the current immigration patterns continue? Are we going to be able to find mechanisms to compare what's happening now sort of on a move forward basis and get a better grip on where those patterns may be coming next?
Through the chair, it's very challenging to find data sources to help us anticipate what could happen next year or the next couple of years. There's reports on the federal government website in IRCC and Stats Canada on targets that they set, but targets are different than the actual number of immigrants that are processed. So largely we are looking at counts that come from other organizations that are reflecting the past. When we need to project next school year, we really are concentrating on our own experiences over the past year. So we'll be looking very closely at the newcomers that we've experienced this year, looking at the targets that the federal government has created, looking at the immigration reports for Ontario and the City of Toronto, but it still is an estimate as to what we could experience next year. It is a process of looking at the past rather than getting a piece of data that is telling us what exactly is going to come next year.
Okay, and does this year, can you make the assumption that seeing what happened this year will give us more accurate numbers for the coming year? Would that be the case?
We based upon 2 years now of high immigration levels and that the federal government targets remain high, and actually they're going to be increasing to 2026, where the targets is 500,000. We'd be factoring into the projections a similar level of newcomers as we've got this year. So we would see that happening for the next couple of years at least.
Okay, and we also saw a development of different type of patterns. You alluded to it, right? The sort of older high school students, for example. It's not that what we've seen before. Is there a way to plan for the analysis for that? And I'm getting to another question around international students on that too. So that's part of the reason why I'm asking these questions.
Through the chair, the increase in the 18 to 21-year-olds, it is a brand new trend. We have been on a consistent decline for the last 10 years in terms of the 18 to 21-year-olds. So ever since grade 13 was eliminated, more and more students each year have been graduating within 4 years, and fewer students have been returning for a 4.5 year or a 5th year. So this year it was a new trend to see more 18 to 21-year-olds in our system, more than we had last year, because we projected a further decline. So when we're doing the school-by-school projections, we'll be sharing the figures with the principals and having discussions with them to get their insights on a school-by-school level. We'll be delving into our own data in more detail. We'll be looking at that 18 to 21-year-olds. How much of it is existing students who are just returning for a 5th year? How much of it is newcomers who happen to be older newcomers and they haven't been here for 4 years? They're really beginning in the public school system now, but they happen to be older newcomers. So we're going to learn more over the next 2 months as we delve into the school-by-school projections. But it is a new trend that we need to investigate.
Thank you, and through the chair, we're very much interested in knowing that, because anecdotally, I've had that conversation with principals about newcomers. So maybe it's overrepresented in my neighborhood and so on. I'd be interested in knowing what the pattern is for the city, because it would have an effect, obviously, on the resources that we're going to have in different high schools. The other set of questions I had was in relation to international students and those students that are undocumented. Do we keep track of the number of students that we accept into the system year to year?
Through the chair, could you explain that again?
Undocumented.
The number of students that we accept into the system?
That are undocumented year to year.
Through the
Documented.
chair. So all students are documented, and the policy, it's actually ask, don't tell. So we do record basic demographic data, such as arrival date in Canada and country that they come from. So some of those students and families don't have an official status in Canada, and we're not reporting on that, but we are tracking them as students. So we do have their count, and we do know when they arrived, and we do know what country they came from. And the reason why we're collecting that bare demographic is because it does factor into our grants. Associate Director Zucker mentioned the English as a Second Language grant, and that's based upon those two driving factors. When did you arrive in Canada, and what country did you come from? So those minimal demographic data are collected from all students, including those ones that are undocumented, that don't have an official status here. So we do know all of the students, they're all accounted for. We know that information that I just described. In terms of their status in Canada, I believe we probably could query that to determine how many we have under each category and which ones are undocumented. We don't have that at our fingertips for tonight.
Fair, and I was looking for that information in the report. I didn't see it. I would be interested in getting that information, not necessarily in the public report, but maybe in one of the trustee reports from a director or whatnot, because I think it feeds into a lot of what we've been getting anecdotally in terms of newcomer families struggling to figure out how to access the system. And ultimately, it does have an effect on our baseline funding. Whether we're funded for every student equally or not, it would be remiss not to understand what the effect of this sort of very large cohort of students that's accessing the system by one way or another. So I'd be very interested in getting that information over the next few weeks if possible. And that's it. Thank you again, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Deputies. We have Trustee Shan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff for putting this report together, and thanks for all the hard work that went into all the calculations. And I'm glad to see we got it right in most of the schools. You know, not to be picking on the places where we had not gotten it right. I just wanted to explore what could be done in like, for example, one of my schools, the high school, the projected enrollment was way below the, not way below, significantly below the actual. What had happened as a result is that they had to surplus 2 new teachers who had come in and done quite a bit of work connecting with the community, school community, students, building special programs and things like that as their first year. And both those teachers had to leave. And when the enrollments were significantly higher, now the school has to post for new positions, and that replacement has taken time. And you know, obviously there are some issues around applications and how many people are applying and so on. In an area like that, where the school also indicated that they feel like the projection was much below ahead of time, and an area where there's a larger newcomers coming in regularly, is there special consideration that are being made? Because the impact at the school level, you know, at a board level, we can look at these numbers and be happy, but at that school, it's contributed to a little bit of a mess. And I was visiting the school a week before, and the impact is still felt through domino effect around the movement of the teachers and other positions that have become people who have left. Everything has compounded into a situation that in high school, that we are halfway down the semester and there's still a chaos. So I wanted to ask, like, what additional consideration are being made in schools that have been impacted this way when projections are made next year? Would some of those things be taken into consideration?
Thank you, Trustee Shan.
Through the chair, the projections are done fresh each year. So each year we incorporate the latest actual enrollments, and the enrollments broken down by program and by age. We incorporate the latest residential development information. We incorporate any board decision on boundary changes or program moves. We have a projection system that looks at all the feeders of elementary schools into the high school. So every year the projections are done new, and they don't really rely on the previous year's projection. But part of the projection process is discussion and receiving input from other departments. We engage special education, we engage French as a second language department, we engage the principal and the superintendent. So it's always our endeavor to be spot on with the projections. But the process is focused on the most recent information that we have. So the fact that a school was over or above projection in the past, it doesn't really bear into the calculation going forward, because the projection methodology really is starting brand new, incorporating all the latest demographic and program information. So I'm not sure if I can add any more information than that, Trustee Shan, that the previous performance really isn't a factor in the new projection, because it is all done new.
Thank you. thank you to staff through you, Mr. Chair. So if we do have a situation in which, I'm not suggesting that that's the case, but for example, if we have consistently projected below the actuals over last few years in a particular area, wouldn't it be prudent to kind of consider maybe there are some things that we might not be looking at in a particular setting or school? So I do understand it has to start fresh, but if there is some analysis around if the projections were off in certain areas over a extended number of years, maybe 3 years or 2 years or 3 years or so, would that be something that would flag your data in how you proceed through you, Mr. Chair?
Through the chair, if a school has been off projection consistently in one way over a number of years, then it would be captured in the information that we use. Like, we really delve into things like retention rates and the grade 8 feeder pool and how many grade 8s end up in grade 9. So yes, if there is a trend that has materialized over the last 3 years, then it would be apparent in the new projection as it's calculated.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Shan. We have Trustee Arts.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering about the older students, so the ones that are over 18. There were some questions about newcomers, and Mr. Gowdy, you did mention students that may not have graduated on time or by the ministry's terms within 4 years. But I'm wondering how many of those students have actually graduated and are returning to us for additional courses. So not necessarily enrolled in like our day schools, but I'm going to use the example of my kids' convocation, and also what I'm hearing from teachers and parents, and actually through my conversations at OPS, but also from other boards. So it seemed like at convocation this year, a quarter to a third, like a significant number of students as they crossed the stage said, I'm back for more courses, I'm taking a 5th year. And so there were a striking number of students, and I've heard this from other people as well. So I'm wondering if we have an increase, and if we do, I guess you'll be delving into the numbers more deeply per school, as you said. If that shows up, what do we then convey to the ministry, or what considerations do we take into account that students are coming back to us for more courses?
Through the chair. Thank you for the question, Trustee Arts. So we've heard anecdotally, what you've heard is that there are students who have graduated who are returning for more courses in higher numbers than we've experienced in the past. So we will be looking into that when we get into the school by school projections to understand how many are newcomers, how many are students who've already graduated, how many students were there for 4 years but had intentions of staying longer than 4 years. So we don't have that answer for you right now. In terms of what this means for the system serving more students who are older seeking more courses, I think it's food for thought at this time. I don't have a response to give you.
Are there supplemental question? What is our funding for students who have graduated? How does the ministry fund students who have graduated versus and come back to us for more courses versus those on a 5th year who haven't actually gotten their OSSD yet?
Can I ask Executive Officer Snyder to speak to that, please?
I'm just looking up the information. Give me a moment.
Can you repeat?
Sure. I'm wondering how if the funding differs, and if so, how it differs for students returning to a school board after they've achieved their OSSD for additional courses. So not necessarily students who did not graduate and need a fifth year to finish up, but those who have already graduated.
So through the chair, I will start, and you're testing my knowledge because it's been a long time since I've been into the grants, but we do know that when students come back, they may be part-time, and part-time students obviously would not receive as much funding, because a lot of times when people have graduated and then they come back, they may be only taking 1 or 2 courses a semester as opposed to a full course load, so that does impact the grants. And there is also an age that impacts grants as well. So we will take a further dive into that and provide more information. But yes, there would be an impact on funding. And this was something that the ministry was aware of and made changes to a number of years ago, because in order to recognize that there were students that there were a number of students who were taking 5 years and in secondary schools compared to 4.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to the numbers when the further analysis is done.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. We have Trustee Arad.
Thanks very much. I had a question, and this is just still like getting into the cycles when you're into the board. Last year was a very difficult budget cycle, and with some of the school-based staff cuts, some schools were really, I feel, on the edge with what was provided to them. It's very low floor. And so in seeing this, I mentioned Duca Connaught School already tonight, but Duca Connaught School comes to mind, where they were, their projections, here they're on the chart as having 40 more students, which seems small, but just given how significant the cuts were at that school in particular, it's one in the ward I represent, so I know it well. Child also goes to school there. I know, like the floor was very low. And so I'm wondering in schools, because they can't be the only one system-wide, when we know that they are really challenged with the staffing they have, what options are there for flexibility? And what's been happening operationally to sort of accommodate when there's been a change in the actual enrollment from projected that's really challenging the staff model? Thank you.
So thank you. Through the chair, I will start, and then I will ask Executive Superintendent Linton to supplement. So when we do the projections for schools, obviously we use the enrollment as one of the factors that help us to determine the allocation specifically for support staff. If we're talking about classroom teachers, then that one's a little bit easier, because through the reorganization, everything gets adjusted. We don't usually do a reorganization for support staff. We recognize that some of the support staff follow the needs of the students, and other support staff, again, are allocated, like vice principals, for example, would be allocated as enrollment as one of the factors. And as you indicated, there were a number of schools that were, above 25 above the projection. There were also a number of schools that are more than 25 below. So we don't do a reorganization of support staff at the same time that we look at the classroom teachers. That being said, we would look at the needs of the particular schools and make any adjustments if necessary. Through the revised budget, you'll see information come back. We were also asked, there was a motion related to vice principals specifically. So that information will come back in January as well. But for more specifics, I'm going to ask Executive Superintendent Linton to respond.
Thank you. And through the chair, I think just to add to what Ready Associate Director Zucker has already mentioned, I think there's also just the challenge associated with the funding. And what I mean by that is the finite number of resources and how all the interplay that Associate Director Zucker has already mentioned. So just to go into some granular pieces within elementary, as she mentioned, reorg happens and a lot of these matters are sort of resolved and dealt with. As it relates to the allocation of EP, as Associate Director Zucker said, one of the matters is that we look at is, communities. We also look at LOI, special needs. We also look at the voice of the learning network superintendent and also the executive. And so this is something that falls within the elementary spectrum. But again, secondary, and that was also mentioned earlier, is very similar, where additional teaching resources are made available to schools as the need presents. And it's related to their ability to comply with class size parameters and the workload accord. And those numbers are really at the end of October 31st. So in some situations where we have semestered schools, and many of our schools are semestered, we would look at numbers in first semester, and then we would look at numbers again in second semester. It's also about the timetable and how it's configured. The timetables are shaped around the student demand, available facilities, resources, staffing allocation that's determined, but it's also subject to adjustments in the fall and the winter based on student enrollment. And of course, the workload accord is really the big thing that we really abide by as it relates to the collective agreement. This is part of that, makes up part of the collective agreement understanding that we have with our unionized groups. And so the accord stipulates class size parameters that are bound around secondary schools. I know you've mentioned Duke of Connaught, so we hope that we've answered that around the elementary piece. And I just want to also say about support staff that around collective agreements, there are a lot of provisions, and again, Associate Zucker already mentioned this, but that really we are looking at. So as it relates to the needs of school, the collective agreements also are things that we do have an obligation to be abiding by. So I hope that it does provide a bit of a lens and a bit of support to what has already been mentioned. But one of the real other things that I should mention before I finish is just we also try to ensure that there's the least disruption to students. So I have mentioned a few times collective agreements because that's the other consideration, but the disruption to students and their learning is something that we really are mindful of as it relates to these numbers coming in, as was already mentioned by Executive Officer Gowdy. And so these conversations are very fluid in September and also in October, and again, second semester as well for secondary school. So I hope that helps.
Thanks very much. It does help, and I'm glad that there will be a report coming to board later on VPs in particular. I would be remiss if I didn't use some of the time to note what I'm hearing in the community, broader than just Duke of Connaught, but just the worry that this is the new floor, and that this new floor, what we're experiencing this year in schools, is untenable for school-based staff. And so that's principals and VPs, it's lunchroom supervisors, it's office support, it's ESLs, DYWs. I'm going to miss some of the categories, but I personally seeing in the community how tired everyone is. And I think it's just, I'm so grateful to everyone that is working in our schools every day. And I do want to acknowledge that we're seeing the strain that last year's budget is taking on our school communities. And so I am very hopeful that over time, we will have the resources to have some of the flexibility we know we need when sometimes there are differences, despite the excellent work of the planning team around projected and actuals, so that our schools can really have the supports that they need. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Arad. And I have a question. Can I pass the chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you to you, Mr. Chair. I mean, it's a good news when we see lots of immigrations coming in. But I also see one line which says other country. So are the students living for other countries?
Through the chair, yes, we have, we're receiving students from other countries, but we also are losing students to other countries. So there is in-migration and there's out-migration, but there's more coming in than we have going out.
Thank you to you, Mr. Chair. So I have a follow-up. How do we monitor, or what is the mechanism that we monitor this, that they're leaving the country? Is it a temporary or it's a permanent?
Through the chair, a departure code is entered when they are no longer registered with us. There is an opportunity for a student to leave us temporarily. They can communicate with the principal. They can let the principal know what their extended vacation plans are. The principal has an opportunity to give them a program of study that allows them to stay on the register. If a program of study is not given to them and they are away for an extended period of time, then the principal would demit them. But they could be admitted upon their arrival.
Thank you very much. That's all from me, Chair.
I'll give the chair back.
Thank you, Didavides. Vice Chair Didavides. Do you have any other questions, trustees, online? Can we have a mover and seconder for item 4.3? Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Thank you, Vice Chair Didavides.
Sean in favor.
Hastings in favor.
Turnus in.
Hassan in favor.
Arts in favor.
McLean in favor.
And it's carried. Moving along, item 4.4, major capital renewal projects status update. And who's speaking to this?
Through the chair. Tonight is a great opportunity for me to recognize the hard work of all of the staff that report to me. So again, before I turn it over to Executive Officer Pachetti, I just want to acknowledge, even just the sheer volume of the work that is happening. We had a record year in 22-23 with regards to the amount of funding that we actually spent. We were up around 320 million, which is incredible and will only continue to increase, not only because costs are increasing, but also because of the capital revitalization strategy that trustees have seen. So I'm going to turn this over to Executive Officer Pachetti to walk us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair, thank you, Associate Director Zucker. Yes, we like to build things, and we're very excited by the amount of work that we're able to do to improve our schools. So the major capital and renewal projects status update report covers 5 main topics. Appendix A, which you've seen before, provides the current capital projects in terms of providing you with information about the approvals process and the funding approved to date. Now, I would like to point out that we've placed in your blue folder a revised version of Appendix A because we noticed that when we formatted it for eScribe, we inadvertently hit a row. And so you did not see the project for Dennis Avenue Community School. That's a replacement school. So the Appendix A in your blue folder is the correct version of this report. There are 17 capital projects listed in Appendix A. That includes 1 demolition. 3 projects are completed. 7 are in design. 6 are in construction, and that includes the 2 insurance-funded restoration projects, York Memorial CI and Jones Avenue Public School. We recently received approval to proceed to tender for the Phase 2 and Phase 3 of York Memorial CI, and that work will be issued for tender in early December, and we anticipate bringing a report to the board in February to approve the contract. Now, the other aspect of this report, and I know you're familiar with me mentioning this, We continue to see cost escalations, cost pressures across the province in the construction industry. And in the report, I do try to provide some light at the end of the tunnel in the sense that there have been some changes at the provincial level and also at the ministry approval level that may have a positive impact on project timelines. So in the report, in Appendix B, I provide you with a summary of prepared by the TLC of Bill 23 and Bill 109 and their implications on the TDSB project. So this information was shared in the January 27th Trustee Weekly by TLC. There is a lot of information in there, but it does indicate that under the province's mandate to build homes faster, we will see changes in the approvals process at the municipal level that may speed up our projects as well. And under the ministry's approval process, we did give trustees an overview of some of the changes when we presented the Capital Priorities Program report vis-a-vis what the ministry is trying to do to streamline their own approvals process. So it's early days to see whether, in fact, all of these changes, when they will happen and when we will see the benefit from them. But I think there is across the province and certainly in the City of Toronto, in the GTA, recognition that the process, the approvals process is taking a fair amount of time. And of course that impacts construction costs because we get funding approval in 1 year and then 4 years later or 5 years later is when we actually go out to tender. So that always has an impact on our capital budget. Third topic in the report is really providing you with an update regarding the school renewal program. I do talk about in the report changes that came about through the ministry's capital funding B07 memo. Most important thing for you to note is that boards are asked to use any existing school condition improvement or renewal funds from previous years by March 31st, 2027. Now, that's a fair amount of work that has to be planned, tendered, and executed. And there are some concerns about the pressure this will put on construction pricing since everybody across the province is going to be tendering the same type of projects. But one of the things we mentioned in the report, which was also mentioned when we talked about the capital revitalization plan, is that we need to look at how we can do work beyond the summer months. In other words, doing work throughout the school year, recognizing that we need to work with stakeholders to address any safety concerns and minimize disruption to schools. And the idea being that if you can spread the work out, you perhaps aren't causing so much volume and pressure to get the work completed in 8 weeks. Although, as you know, in the recent conversation about the Duke of Connaught, there are often challenges with trying to do the work when it's in an occupied school. So those are things that we're going to be working on and looking at. Appendix C and its accompanying information, Appendix D, provides you with a list of all the work currently underway or planned at schools, sorted by ward. And as Associate Director Zucker mentioned, in 2023, we did 2,773 school renewal projects for a total of $389 million. The report also provides you with some information about the COVID-19 resilience infrastructure stream funding. That is a mouthful. We call it SIVRIS funding, and explains a little bit about that program. The deadline is December 31st, 2023. Appendix E provides you with the list of the type of projects that were funded through SIVRIS and the funding amounts. We still have work underway, so we are not finished with that program. And so the report is really the funding as of early November. And then finally, the other update in the report is we wanted to share with you the capital signage that we put on new school projects, major capital projects and major additions, and we've added a QR code. And the QR code will link people to our capital website. So this is something we've just started rolling out now. The work that went into that, the coordination, was very much in response to how can we share more up-to-date information, not only with our school communities, but the general public who might want to know what's going on at the site and on the at their school. And I know there's some interest that we try to do the same thing with our renewal projects. How can we communicate information? And that was talked about when we presented the Capital Revitalization Strategy Report, and it's something that we would be interested in looking at. What is the most modern and dynamic way to provide information to the community? And certainly hope that we're not looking at chopping down a lot of trees and sending out a lot of paper flyers, that we have other ways to communicate to the broader community. And that's something we can bring back as that capital revitalization strategy is further developed. So that concludes my summary of the report, and I'm joined by capital and renewal staff, and we would be very pleased to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Officer Meyer. Do you have a speakers list? Trustee Alexis Dawson, go ahead.
Thank you so much, through the chair. Thank you for this wonderful report. It's great to see the progress. I did have a question about George Syme and the addition, the 4 classroom addition. I understand that a bathroom is not a part of this addition and that there were no additional bathrooms incorporated into the previous renovations when the school turned from a K-5 to a K-8 school. So I just wondered what the rationale for not adding any bathrooms would be, and maybe a broader question of at what point do we add bathrooms? Like how many classrooms would it take to warrant a new bathroom? Thank you, through the chair.
Thank you, and through the chair. The building code is the thing that determines how many washroom fixtures you require in a school, and it's based on the occupancy of the school. So whether or not there are a lot of existing washrooms in the building, whether then we need to add additional washrooms. But for the specifics of George Syme's, I'm not sure if Manager Prithula Prusen is online. She may be able to speak to George Syme's. If not, we can certainly provide you with that info.
Through the chair, thank you, Maya. Yes, for George Syme, it's the same issue. When we are looking at any new school design, the OBC, the Ontario Building Code, is what prescribes how many washrooms we can do. We also take into consideration what the ministry is funding us for and the facility space template that gives us certain percentage of areas such as washrooms, and basically based on the building code requirement, we would then include the number of washrooms that's required, as Maya had noted. I'm happy to look specifically to the George Syme project, and Trustee Dawson, we can definitely give you a little bit more information in the history of if washrooms were discussed at any point and bring back that information to you.
Thank you so much. I just have one other question through the chair. So when we go from K-5 to K-8, if we're not adding bathrooms, what is the protocol to upgrade the bathrooms to account for example, students menstruating? Like, my understanding is that George Syme in particular, and I'm not sure if this is a widespread thing, but they've turned to from a K to 5 to K to 8, and yet they have no facilities for the female students in the washrooms. They don't have garbage receptacles in individual stalls, and they don't have the products available in the bathrooms.
Thank you, and through the chair. So they're right off the bat, I would say we want to look at that and see why they are not installed in washrooms, and we can certainly follow up with the principal. George Symes was also received a major retrofit of the second floor, where it went from the open plan concept to enclosed classrooms. I'm not sure if we added washrooms in that case. We can certainly look into that. And, you know, principals are, through their FTL, able to order and ask for those. They should be standard. I don't understand why they're not, but that's certainly something we can follow up with the school about.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. We have Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I want to start with the communications and the sign in Appendix F. First of all, I think it's great. I'm curious to know that I don't see anything, no provincial logo, no provincial messaging here. Do we still are we still required to put up the provincial sign? First question. Second part of that question is, do we pay for that, or does that come with funding, or is the board required to pay for the sign that says whatever the province tells us to say? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Go ahead, Maya.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm going to turn to Manager Beltrano because I actually can't remember if boards are required to pay for that signage. But yes, we are required to put ministry signage up on the building or on the fence when there is a capital project. So Manager Beltrano, I don't know if you're there, Sal?
I can take this one, Maya, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Through the chair. Yes, there will be, for every project we have under construction, there will be continue to be a specific sign from the ministry that's mandated. Typically, the cost of that signage comes out of the project budget, so the cost is covered through the actual capital project. The intent of our new capital project sign is to go right adjacent to the ministry sign, so you would see both signs sort of adjacent to each other, and they're designed to be the same size so that there's a cohesive look to the signage on site.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I am really glad this is here because I know on the capital projects previously, I've had to ask about signage, what the picture looks like so the community can see it. So I'm really pleased that this is standardized. But through you, Madam Chair, I have another suggestion. So I do appreciate all the work that's there, and those projects are divided by ward. And I do appreciate your grappling with how to actually advertise some of the other retrofit programs. I have a suggestion for consideration, and that is to actually divide them by ward, to actually do the signage by ward, put them on the trustees' individual websites under a new, sorry, I'm not as computer literate, to folder, I guess, on the website. And then trustees can link to them in their newsletters. Because I, on my own, have cut and pasted all the things in Ward 8 and made my own list and put it on my website. But I think it should be done for trustees. And I think that's a way to advertise them, because hypothetically in the newsletter, if if a major retrofit is happening at one of the schools in your ward, then you can talk about it in your newsletter and include the link that they can go right to, see the picture, see the sign. That's more cost effective in my mind, because it can be just a sign this size than creating a big sign to have to post somewhere. Because I agree with you, you don't want the paper stuff going home. You want things to be digital, but you also want it to be nice and explain. So for a major retrofit, maybe there's a picture like this, but then for more information, click on, and then it can go to the board report that provides the details of all the components of the build and how we got the funding. Again, you know, when we're lucky enough to have a big project in our ward, you want to be able to talk to the community about it. And up till now, trustees have had to kind of create their own. So I really like the idea you're thinking of it more systematically. And that would be my suggestion, is make it easy for us to, and as an automatic. And then when there are updates, like twice a year, those project lists get updated. Again, it's automatically done. The old one's replaced with the new one. I just think it would be great, a great benefit for all of us to have that information done for us, as opposed for us having to create it. So that's that through you, Mr. Chair. Appendix B, I laughed out loud when I saw NTCI was designated heritage. Since when is a building that's just 10 years old designated heritage, through you, Mr. Chair? It makes me giggle at that designation, and I'm really wondering if it is accurate, through you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, I also had that question. And I will follow up in case there is some other building they're thinking of, or something else that they're thinking of.
Maybe they mean Northern and not NTCI, but.
Yeah.
And
Maybe.
anyway, it just struck me, through you, Mr. Chair, as being a bit absurd. It was only opened in 2010, right?
Yeah.
And then my other question was, and I did mention this to Mr. Gowdy, through you, Mr. Chair, is that there is no longer a Sir Sanford Fleming. It needs to be taken out of the lexicon. It's now Baycrest. And it took me a long time to get Vaughan Road also changed to just 529 Vaughan. When we close schools, we shouldn't be referring to the buildings that they used to be in with the names of the schools that no longer exist. That was my other question. And thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Great work, as always.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. We have Trustee Art.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff for the detailed report. Just to follow up on Trustee Laskin's questions about the signs and what Ms. Pachetti outlined for information that'll be available to the public. I wonder if there can be notices posted on the school or around the school, like on the front doors, maybe like on a gate, a fence gate that the public accesses, that happens before the construction actually happens. I think having QR codes in a place that people can go to find information, that's amazing. But I know, and I know that you know, this summer there were quite a few projects in my ward, and then new portables this fall and things like that, that have generated a lot of ire from the community because they didn't have a longer term heads up that anything was happening. Like in the end, it hasn't changed their access and the grounds have been beautified. It's okay. We do have a lot of school neighbors who believe that schools are public property and they should be consulted on exactly what happens with them. But I know that's not going to happen and I'm not proposing that, but if they had a longer heads up that, hey, we know this project is coming, next summer, or we know that a major retrofit, yard work, that sort of thing is coming in a year's time, then it would just be a place where there's a little bit more notice, and it's less of a surprise. And I love Trustee Laskin's idea of having projects by word linked on trustee websites that people can, you know, when they're looking to contact us, they would also see, hey, there's projects here. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. We have Trustee Arhad.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much for this report. I'm thrilled to receive it. And I so appreciate the work that goes into these. So many of my questions are answered as I read the report, and so many questions of my constituents are answered, and of the school councils in my ward who I share the information with. It's something that, at least in my community, the information is just consumed, not just by me, but the community at large. And so thank you very much. I have a few questions. The first tranche of questions are around ventilation and the SIVERS funding. So I'm very happy that the broader report will be coming in January on reducing respiratory illnesses in school. There's of course capital components to that, but also operating components. So excited that that will be coming to PPC shortly. In terms of SIVERS and the funds that must be spent by December 31st, I wanted to hear a bit more about that. It looks like there's about $11 million remaining to be spent. And are we on track to spend that in time, and what happens if we don't? So it looked to me like water stations, HVAC updates, and BAS updates. Like an HVAC update can't stop midstream. And so what happens if it's not spent by December 1st? Thank you.
Through the chair, as I explained in the report, this was a particularly challenging program for us because it came with a very short notice, and it had a very, very tight, initially, very tight turnaround. You know, originally we received the funding April 6, 2022, and we had until March 2023 to spend the funding. So that is 1 year, and that is 1 year to do ventilation projects while the schools are occupied, although of course there was one summer in there, while we were already seeing increased lead times for mechanical equipment, if not almost impossible in some cases to get some mechanical equipment. And we couldn't turn off ventilation in order to do the work while the school is occupied. It was an incredibly challenging program. And then they extended the deadline to December 31st, thank goodness, to December 31st, but they would not allow us to move projects around or move funding around. So when we had to give that initial list of projects and the funding, or our estimated cost of the funding, it was predicated on what we thought we could do by the end of March. And then they said, well, actually, you can keep going till the end of December. But you can't move money from one project to another. So unfortunately, if the funding is not used, it's returned. It's because this is federal funding primarily. There's a small portion of it that's provincial. So what we have been doing is trying to augment existing scopes where possible to see if we can benefit from this additional funding. But even there are certain rules. You are not allowed to do maintenance work under this project, under this funding. So, you know, that's when you do a recommissioning in a building and you've replaced the building automation system, some of that work may fall under maintenance. We're, you know, having to pay attention to that. So unfortunately, any funding that is not used has to be returned. We continue to put pressure on the ministry to see if they would advocate for us with the federal government to allow us to continue doing work or to choose other projects. But so far, we have not been successful. And because we received a huge amount of projects, you know, I think we're not like smaller boards that we're able to much more quickly and efficiently take on the work. So yeah, there will be some funding that remains that will get updated to the board, but we are trying to get as much done now within all those constraints they've given us before December 31st.
Okay, thanks so much. And I really appreciate this challenge. And I'm wondering if there may be any benefit to board advocacy or even board knowledge around which schools may be implicated in terms of the work's stopping if funding runs out. Do we have any sense of that at this point, recognizing that I'm sure everybody's working hard to spend every last dollar before the deadline?
So there will be no projects that stop halfway through. I just want to assure you of that. I mean, we're really already almost at the tail end of most of these projects. And, you know, we will push right to the max. And whether that means that the final invoicing happens in January, well, that's fine. It's, you know, we'll just push it as far as we can. And if there is anything that we have to continue working on, and there aren't that many, we would then fund that work out of school condition improvement grant.
Okay, thank you. And just to keep on Severus, I imagine that through that process, we developed all kinds of ideas that could happen, that could meet the intended purpose of that funding, but which didn't meet the rigorous and stringent guidelines and timelines that were provided. Do we have that list still of what we might have been able to do had there been different windows of opportunity for the funding?
Thank you, through the chair. You know, that's a really interesting question, and I think the climate action report talked a lot about how we can look more closely at how we operate our buildings and how the systems within our buildings are managed from the building automation point of view, from some of the controls that are in the building. And those are things that might fall under maintenance and not school condition improvement grant. And that's always been a bit of our frustration, is that school condition grant is very much about renewing the existing system as opposed to repairing the existing system. But you will see in the next climate action report that the work to sort of ensure our building automation systems provide the information that we need to better operate the buildings, and in turn be more precise about, you know, some of the components that may not be responding properly and how we can improve that, because mechanical ventilation systems are very much about, you know, dampers opening, dampers closing, occupancy sensors, temperature, and so on. A lot of moving parts. So the work that the sustainability department is doing with caretakers, looking at our building automation system, is going to reveal that information that we can bring back to the board.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's just such a shame, like there's so many co-benefits to other federal and provincial objectives to doing this work right. And so I think it's just such a shame that the funding envelopes, their timelines, their scope, their guidelines don't fit the ultimate shared objectives that all orders of government have here. And so I think there's a real opportunity sort of in our budget advocacy for all of that. One other tranche of questions I have is around accessibility. I know accessibility was only mentioned really towards the end in terms of the report for the capital revitalization strategy framework, noting the need to use proceeds of disposition to cover work that's not funded through SCI. I think the last update on accessibility was in 2021, so before my time as a trustee. I'd love to see an update on ideas around accessibility and for the built environment for our schools. And I wanted to know if the school renewal allocations of AODA compliance can be funded through SRA, and just any thoughts around accessibility and where we're at in terms of this status update. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. So we do accessibility projects, but we don't call them out specifically as accessibility. So we do washroom upgrades to include universal or barrier-free washrooms. We do, elevator upgrades where the elevator is existing. All our site projects, the majority of their site projects also follow AODA compliance in terms of, making accessible surfacing available. What is not available to us under the current funding is major accessibility improvements like adding elevators. Our school renewal SRA funds, you can use that funding towards accessibility, but it is a limited amount of money. I think we receive 47 million a year. I just can't remember now. And so with all the other demands on school renewal allocation, to undertake a major project to add, say, 10 elevators across the system would be, 15 million or so, given the cost of doing a new elevator to a school. So it has been folded into the capital revitalization strategy as a key guiding principle and component. And, we would be seeking use of POD under that capital revitalization strategy to undertake accessibility upgrades across the system. We are working on an accessibility update report, but we did want to make sure it was aligned with our capital revitalization strategy. So that report is in the works, and I think we were hoping to bring something in the spring in terms of an update on accessibility. And
Sorry, and through the chair, I just wanted to add, we do receive about $300 million of funding annually from the ministry, but only less than 50 million of it is renewal, and the rest is SCI. And there are some pretty strict restrictions on the use of SCI funding. So the only grant that we receive from the ministry that has the flexibility to not be replacements, but to actually be anything new is through the renewal grant. And as Executive Officer Pachetti indicated, there are so many demands on renewal funding. And so, again, from our perspective, it is difficult for us to work within the existing parameters of the restrictions on the funding that we receive, because we can spend proceeds of disposition on SCI work without ministry approval. But again, the restrictions related to school condition improvement grants are also there on the proceeds of disposition as well. So I just wanted for all trustees to have that understanding. That $50 million, and again, 50 million sounds like a lot, not so much when you've got $4.2 billion of deferred maintenance in 600 buildings. There are very, well, it's not a lot of money for that, and I'm going to use in quotes, unrestricted spending.
Thank you, Sarah. Trustee Arad?
Thank you. No, thank you, Chair. I still have more. And yes, that 50 million is shockingly and embarrassingly low in terms of the scale of facilities. And the scale of needs to be AODA compliant. And even when you compare to what the scale of the city's operations right now to become AODA compliant in the city's built environment, we're really starting to see how our schools, it really sounds to me like through no fault of the TDSB, is falling further and further behind in terms of a student's experience in getting to school, being at school, returning home from school, as we go to that 2025 deadline for AODA compliance. So just thank you. I appreciate the details of that update, and I'm really happy to hear that we're thinking about accessibility and how the work that has been undertaken to date on that is fitting with the capital revitalization strategy. So that's really exciting. I had just comments about capital signage. I'm so excited to see the signage. I'm so thrilled to see the website. As soon as Jones School has a link and web link on that, I'm going to be thrilled to share it with my community. It is, I think this is a really great initiative. In terms of comments for consideration for that, I know in my community, like Trustee Arts, some of the major external repairs that are underway, so not additions, but roof repairs, some of the renewals, especially ones that involve hazmat suits. Anything that's asbestos abatement, even inside, if we have people going in our community wearing hazmat suits, there's going to be a high level of interest. And so it would be great if we could consider how to have the signage expand beyond additions and new builds and into some of those major renewals that where we anticipate there would be high external community and interest. External paving is another good example. If that could be considered, it would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Arad. Do you want to respond, Mara? Good. Thank you. Vice Chair Didavides, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I want to start again by thanking staff for the work that they're doing. So happy to see the increase in investment, and I want to be able to support that as we move forward. And so I'll start my questions there. I saw we have an example in the report that uses Dennis Avenue as a way to illustrate, the sort of inflationary pressures that we're facing as we go through the approval process. When we were having a discussion about the childcare construction, I think the CPI rate over the last 5 years was something around 21%. So I sat down just here to do the calculation of what the inflationary rate was for this project, and it was actually 68%. What is the effect of that logistically in terms of being able to get the approvals for these projects as we push them out?
Thank you, and through the chair. So as mentioned in the report, the timeline between when we get approval, the funding approval, versus when we're able to go out to tender is one impact. In the case of Dennis, because we did bring the report to award the contract for Dennis, Dennis also being built on a small site, the design, we had to go through a few more sort of structural gymnastics to make the building fit on the site and accommodate all the program. So that accounts for that. I think one of the things that, and we bring this up all the time to the ministry, is that we're building in very dense urban neighborhoods, or dense neighborhoods, not necessarily urban, suburban as well, but occupied, dense neighborhoods. For a contractor to mobilize, for them to get their trucks in and out of that neighborhood, all of that is increased cost and takes the contractor longer to build, and that is factored into the price that they give us. So, it's not just the cost of materials, and it's not just the cost of labor, which has increased significantly in the last few years. It's the sheer fact of building in a very, compressed, dense neighborhood.
Thank you. And then as a follow-up to that, and I know that this is something that through the chair, staff have reported on a number of times, the changes provincially that will affect the municipal approval process. Have we started to see a change in terms of timelines yet? I know that changes are sort of in process, but have we started to see actual changes to that approval process yet?
I don't believe we have, but I am going to turn it to Manager Prosen, who this is what she looks after and deals with every day. So she has a much closer relationship to trying to get our projects through SPA than I do. Perthula, if you're available.
Through the chair, thank you, Maya. So the short answer is not yet. We have not seen significant improvements in timeline yet. Unfortunately, projects that go through SPA or site plan approval with the city is a very long process. And for us to really see significant improvements, we need a few more months to really gauge compared to other projects if there is a difference in the process. What we have noticed, there is one project, specifically Courcelette edition, that is the first project that is getting affected by the new SPA process with the city. What we have seen is there was a large number of initial feedback we received from the city. And the thinking is by getting this type of feedback early into the process, in the long run, it will streamline and make the review process shorter. So that's what we're hoping for. Although because we're going through the first iteration of this, we have not seen any significant measurable difference yet.
And through Chair, are you referring to a pre-application meeting that is supposed to then create efficiencies later?
Through the chair, that's correct. We've always had pre-consultation meetings, but those were very informal and not as comprehensive as the one we have experienced in the last project with Courcelette, where we received a larger number of initial feedback in that pre-consultation meeting, which, as you mentioned, should set us up for a shorter review and less cycles, which is what we're hoping for.
Thank you for that. And to be honest, through Chair, I'm not surprised that that is the case, that you're not yet seeing that, because my own sort of experience in other things tells me that that's the case, and that there's very much still a bottleneck at the city to get those approvals. And Mr. Chair, I wanted to ask a couple more questions, changing the subject a little bit. And just to get a sense of our own sort of ability to process this. What is our staffing capacity to deal with the increase in projects that we foresee coming, so that as we move forward? Amazed to see that this was a record year. We hope to break that record next year. Keeping in mind, obviously, that part of the reason we're spending more money is because it's more expensive. But how much more capacity to do more projects do we have? Because that's a very important question in terms of our ability to put out the projects, carry them out, and do that in a way that is cost efficient, right?
So through the chair, I can start, and I'll ask Executive Officer Pachetti to provide more detail. We do not receive, when we receive additional funding or when we use our proceeds of disposition, we do not receive additional funding for staffing. And so I would say that some boards who are not as large as TDSB, when they have a capital project, they contract out the capital project, including all of the project management, and those costs can be included in the cost of the project. So we are looking at how do we increase our capacity in order to keep up with the demand, and how does that impact, one, our operating budget, but two, what expenses are allowable to be capitalized. And that involves working with the ministry to determine what staffing can be included in those costs. Because again, whether we contract it out or whether we use our in-house knowledge, it shouldn't matter from board to board how they do that. The cost should be covered the same way. And so that's really what we're stressing with the ministry, and what we're hoping that we ensure that as we increase the number of projects and as we have additional capital projects, that we are able to increase staff and include those in the cost of the project. But I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
And through the chair, I would agree with that, and I would look forward to seeing that type of report. I think our ability to put projects out the door is important to our ability to use those cents and dollars efficiently. If the cost of a project goes up to 20% a year, like we saw with this school, sort of delaying the project by a year or two by not having staff who are not going to be making millions of dollars, staff person will make whatever they make at that salary range. But, having those extra staff in place saves us money. I think we have the fiduciary duty to understand what that equation is so that we can make a decision. And, I would welcome staff coming in with a report that sort of explains those monies to us. What is the opportunity cost of not being able to process our projects vis-a-vis inflationary construction costs that in one particular case were up to 20% a year. And I think that's important. Through the chair, last question, and this is in regards to the signage. And for staff, just so you understand, as elected officials, we all are very, very interested in signage and promotional materials. We understand it to a degree that you can't comprehend. We put up signs, we do literature, and we're experts in this. So my 2 cents. In not all neighborhoods will be as keen to use QR codes, so having physical signage in the school is important, but also in places where the neighbors can see it as well, because it's not just the school community that accesses the school, but the larger community that needs to see us doing the work. We need to celebrate that work, and I think that's important. The QR code in this example takes you to the general page, and then you have to find the project. It's a small thing, but for the larger projects, we already have a page, so the QR code should lead you to the specific page. I think that's important so people don't get lost in our website, particularly because we're planning to have more projects, right? And then for the smaller projects, where we can, we should be doing that. So whether it's roof work, electrical work, the kind of stuff that people don't see, because those are large investments, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars that we're spending every year. And we should be letting people know that we are doing the work, especially the work that is harder to see, right? Like planting trees is easy to see, fixing the HVAC, not as easy to understand or see. And I think that's important. And Chair, I'm out of time, but if I could have 30 seconds, I want to congratulate staff because the city actually approved doing something similar to this not very long ago, I'm going to say 8 weeks ago, but they haven't put it in place yet. So the school board's actually getting ahead of the city on this, and I'm very much happy to see us moving ahead.
Through the chair, I did just want to add a comment. The capital signage that you see with the QR code in this report, that's a sample. So it's not, it is still leading to a generic website. The intention is it would take you directly to the project website. And to your comment about the city, I was in Trillium Park recently, and the city had an installation, and they had QR codes available for the installation. So as you walked around, you could find out what, more information about the artist and the art and everything. It was really cool.
Go ahead. Hey, and through the chair, was that at a park, you said?
Yeah, that's Trillium Park, which is the new park that's next to what will be the
city
Ontario
rolling out project signage for utility work and road work. And that hasn't rolled out to my knowledge yet. Park's a little ahead of that in terms of consultations. But I'm very happy to see the school board get ahead of that. You don't see that in other jurisdictions. You don't see that in other municipalities. And you'll see other people copy us right away on this, I think. So I'm very happy to see it.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Tidevidis. Do we have any more speakers? Anybody online? All right. Can we open the vote, please? Can we have a mover and seconder for this item, 4.4? Trustee Laskin, Trustee Tidevidis seconding.
Shan in favor.
McLean in favor.
Trustee Hassan,
Trustee Arts in favor.
Trustee McLean. Chair Chernoslin, good. Absent. Yeah. And it carries. Moving along, item 4.5, it's OPSFA 2023-24 annual membership fee.
Thank you, and through the chair, I would ask Executive Officer Snyder to speak to this, please.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees. So before you is approval for your 23-24 OPSPA annual fee. It's currently set at $437,484.02. It's slightly down from last year. It's based on enrollment and administrative governance grant. Attached in the report, as well as in the appendices, are the benefits OPSPA provides financially and a copy of the invoice. Happy to take any questions.
Do you have anyone on the speakers list? Trustees online? Right. Can we have mover and seconder for this item? Trustee Laskin. Trustee Delides.
Shan in favor.
McLean in favor.
Trustee Arts in favor.
And it's carried. Moving along, item 4.6. It's the Ministry of Education final response and budget consultation for year 2024-25.
So thank you, and through the chair, I'll speak to this, and then I will ask Executive Officer Snyder if he'd like to add anything. Initially, this came to trustees for feedback on what should be included in this budget consultation submission back in October, and there was a tight turnaround when this was due. We did reach out to the ministry because of the tight timeline to see if there would be a possibility of an extension, and they did grant it. So we have submitted this, initially this was going to be brought back to trustees through Trustee Weekly. So it has been submitted, but we thought it would be important to bring it here for information, just so that trustees and the public can see the results of the submission. I will take this opportunity to say that I've looked at a number of submissions. This is very detailed. There's a lot of work that went into this, and there's a lot of thought both at this table and also through staff and the individuals who are responsible for each of the areas to provide that feedback. So we are hopeful that the feedback that we're providing is assisting the ministry in making decisions on funding for 24-25. And we would be happy to take any questions. But again, just a reminder, this has been submitted based on the feedback that was provided in October.
Thank you, Associate Directors. Do you have a speakers list? Yeah. Trustee Laskin, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that it was submitted, but I don't understand, because it was already submitted, why it's not on our website. I mean, you've submitted it. It's only here for information. We can't change it because you've submitted it. So I don't understand why the information is not up to date on our website yet, through you, Mr. Chair.
So thank you, and through the chair, we'll take that back. It does usually get updated on the website when it is submitted, so we will ensure that it is updated. Thank you.
I appreciate that, because when OPSPAS made theirs public, I went to link ours, and it was last year's, and I couldn't quite get it. I knew it was coming here to this special meeting, but it's been submitted. So I do appreciate that it can be linked on our website as quickly as possible. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I think it's a great job, by the way. I appreciate the things that we prioritized, and I think it was really helpful that this was out prior to our colleagues, our OPSPA directors who actually went to OPSPA Advocacy Day. I think it was on Tuesday, and helped use this. Obviously, they needed to talk about provincial issues, but also TDSB specific issues. And through you, Mr. Chair, I wonder if it might be an opportunity if any of the directors are online. And I do think Vice Chair Shan and Trustee Dawson and Trustee Arts were part of the delegation from our board that went. I'm wondering if they might want to let us know how that went. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Anyone online? Trustee Arts?
Hi, yes. So I attended half the day and Trustee Shan attended the other half, and then it was Trustee Williams and Trustee Dawson. In the afternoon, we had great engagement. A bit more, like we got to meet with our former colleague, Trustee Smith. So actually there was quite a bit of traction on the childcare items. And oh yes, of course, overall funding. I think most of the items that we did discuss that got traction were broader provincial focus. The proposals for the accelerated apprenticeship. On a positive note, our conversations with MPPs thought they also thought that the accelerated apprenticeship, what is proposed for that, sounded like a new form of streaming, and they were not in favor of that. Yeah, there's not a lot of time in the meetings, so I don't know if Trustee Shan has more pieces, but I noticed my name's on the list, so I'll just finish off with, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Mr. Snyder and the finance team, especially for coming out and meeting with the SEAC, the Special Education Advisory Committee, Budget Committee, to have a wholesome conversation and include their perspectives and comments in the GSN submission. It was greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. We have Trustee Erhard.
Thanks. I might give way to Trustee Shan, just if he was discussing OPSPAs. I wanted to discuss business arising from this. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Shan, Vice Chair Shan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to add on to Trustee Art's comments and Trustee Laskin's comments, it was a very productive day, very well organized by OPSPA. We had a number of trustees from across the province attending. We had the trustees that were mentioned from TDSB as delegations. We met with MPP Christine Wontam, MPP Jessica Bell, MPP Aris Babican, MPP David Smith, and today we met with MPP Butila Karpushe. So we met with 5 of the MPPs of Toronto and from the official opposition, as well as with the governing party as well. Yeah, our main focus has been around conversations around GSN, mental health, special education, childcare support, and the centers that we are hoping to build. So different MPPs resonated with different issues and different concerns, but overall, I think it was a productive process. And there was some follow-up that's coming up that we will bring back to OPSPA and figure out what some next steps are. Some of them might be provincial follow-up. Some of them might be, ideas for Toronto to have as well. And I think, broadly speaking, it was productive, and it's one of the many avenues of advocacy, but an important one. So, as we talked about earlier, renewing the OPSPA's membership, I think it's critical to acknowledge that this work is critical collectively as we move through facing the new challenges in the education system. And I'll stop with that. And then I think Trustee Arhat has the motion that she will introduce, and I'll be moving it on her behalf. So I'll pass it to us.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shan. Trustee Williams, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add those comments on top of what my fellow trustees have added regarding the Advocacy Day that took place this past Monday. Was on November 27th. And we did speak to a number of MPPs regarding the key issues that, collectively through OPSPA that we've been advocating to the province on. The mental health, special education, student transportation, Indigenous education. In one of those meetings, there was a student trustee from Durham region who, added that student voice to the Advocacy Day, which I thought was very important as well. The accelerated apprenticeship program, as was mentioned, was discussed and, seen, I think, by the MPPs we discussed it with, the disadvantages of proceeding along those lines that look like another form of streaming. And, the focus should be to support the existing programs, the SHISMs, the co-ops, etc. So I thought it was a very productive day, including the reception at the end of the day, where all MPPs and all of the OPSPA members, trustees that were participating attended. And those conversations continued into that as well. So I really appreciated the day. I thought it was very productive. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustee Arhat, you want to go ahead?
Thanks very much. We did a motion a little bit later than this last year, but a motion around budget advocacy. And I wanted to use this opportunity around the ministry's budget consultation to bring forward or to encourage a motion to be brought forward related to our board's participation on broader budget consultations with the federal government, provincial government, and municipal governments. So I don't know if there's something for the screen there that could be put up. It is very similar to what we put forward last year. We're just noting that whereas federal, provincial, and municipal governments have launched 2024 budget consultations, all inviting submissions, be it resolved that our chair present at and send submissions to the relevant budget consultation processes, making note of exceptional challenges faced by children and youth and the critical importance of investments to support students achieving their full potential, calling upon all orders of government to work together to invest in children and youth and support for achieving equitable educational outcomes and their well-being, and then making note of particular areas where efforts and investments across all orders of government are essential. And so there are some additional areas that are flagged here from last year, and we've also enhanced it to say including areas outlined by recent advocacy by the TDSB and the Ontario Public School Boards Association. So giving us an opportunity to really roll up all the advocacy that we've been doing recently, including in areas of mental health, school nutrition, community safety, public health, supports for newcomers and children with disabilities, childcare, school infrastructure funding, and truth and reconciliation. And then the last point B, I do actually want to suggest a modification from what's on the screen. And just that the federal finance minister, provincial minister of finance, provincial minister of education, I'd like to add and other relevant ministers there, and then put the mayor of Toronto, OBSPA, and Ontario Students Trustee Association be copied on any submissions. And so we're thinking it could be very important because some of our past advocacy has included the health minister, and some of the relevant children's ministries may be relevant for that they're aware of our advocacy efforts here too. Just to note some of the engagements that are going on in the municipal budget consultations, they're underway. There are online surveys that are happening right now as well. We could send something following our board meeting. So it will be already too late for their written submission deadline by the time we hit our board meeting, but will only be a few days after. So I suggest we still submit something in writing after the board meeting of December 6th. There's also times where we could register to speak to make submissions within the municipal budget consultation process. Those opportunities take place in January. The provincial budget process, the online survey is open until January 31st. So all of us as trustees, but also all of our constituents can participate in that. The written submission, where presumably our chair would send a written submission, they're taking ideas until January 31st. And there are in-person consultations by the Ministry of Finance, as well as the Provincial Legislative Committee pre-budget consultations taking place. And those ones are taking place throughout December, January. Also, the federal government, there are written consultations through federal parliament, and the federal government's Department of Finance has not yet posted, but I anticipate that will be happening earlier in the new year as well. And so there's several ways that we can, as a board, make speak out on behalf of our students and our school communities through these budget processes, and happy to take questions. And also thanks very much to the FAC trustee members for advancing this motion. Trustee Shannon, Trustee Arts. I don't know if either of them would like to speak to it as well, and just thank you again.
Thank you, Trustee Erhard. Before we move on to the motion, can we have a receipt of the report 4.6? We need to receive, right? Trustee Laskin, seconded by Trustee Didavides. So, trustees, this motion is from Business Arising. I believe that Trustee Erhard wants to make some changes. Am I correct?
Yeah, Chair, it looks like they were added on the screen.
Can we, I'm in favor of
Sorry, Vice Chair Chan. We'll be voting first on item 4.6, and then we'll go to the motion.
Yeah, so I'm just saying in favor.
Chernis Lynn in favor.
Thank you.
Trustee Arts in favor.
Thank you.
McLean in favor.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Trustee Hassan. Trustee Hassan. All right, we can mark absent.
Sorry,
you.
Trustee Hassan in favor.
Thank you, Trustee
Please
Hassan.
mark it down. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we correct it? Okay, and it's carried. Moving along. So Business Arising, do we have a speakers list on the motion? Before we move on to the speakers list, Trustee Shan, because you are moving this, and Trustee Arts, you are seconding it. Are you okay with the changes?
Yeah, I think it's the change should say any relevant ministers in plural instead of minister, from what I heard.
All right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's it.
Sorry. Yes, I am fine with the changes as well. Thank you.
Same here.
Trustee Shan, would it be okay to add the budget chair at the City of Toronto as well to that list?
Sure, more the merrier.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Didavides. Thank you. Trustee Shan, Vice Chair Shan, because you are moving this, do you have anything to add on to this motion?
Yeah, quickly, I just want to thank Trustee Arhart for bringing this on. This is kind of a umbrella way in which we don't have to come back each time to pass a motion to, participate in budget processes. This gives us the kind of the advance go ahead to start looking at increased participation in multiple ways in the budget processes. As we know, much of our work is dependent on other levels of government and governments. And it's critical that we, as a governing body, as the voice of the community representing the school board, that we inform the processes adequately. So I'm very supportive of this motion. It is critical that in the next couple of months, with major budgets coming up and also possibly a federal budget that's going to be a critical budget, that we are on the forefront advocating for our students and families. So I'll be supporting it and moving it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shan. Trustee Arts, you are seconding this motion. Do you have anything to add?
I would echo Trustee Shan's comments. I'm hoping with the federal announcement this year that we might actually see something moving towards the National School Food Program. But thank you to Trustee Arhart for putting this on the floor so that we can be flexible in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, all three of you. We have a speakers list. Trustee Laskin, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm very supportive of this, and we'll use this opportunity to remind trustees that in the OSPA provincial update that came to us on Friday, they did include the link already to the Ontario government's online survey that is open now and closes January 31st that we can all fill out. And I would ask trustees to consider putting that in their newsletter. I did link it in my last update because there is a question. Question 5 asks about, when you think about community, what services or resources could use more government support? And then they ask you to pick the top 3, and one of the options is education supports. So I think that we could have a concerted effort to ensure our constituents know that they have the ability to fill out this survey, and in doing so, support public education. So I'm very supportive of this motion, and I urge all trustees to ensure their constituents know about the online survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Do you have anything else? Anyone online? Trustees? No. Thank you. Can we open the vote?
Turnus Lynn in favor.
Shan in favor.
Hassan in favor.
Arts in favor.
Trustee McLean? In favor. Trustee Hassan?
Trustee Hassan in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Hassan. And it's carried. Before we move on to the last item of today, I'm not sure if Senior Manager Ferris is listening to us, but thank you very much, Senior Manager Ferris, for your service. On behalf of the committee and all the trustees, I'd like to say you thank you very much. We wish you very happy, healthy retirement. So enjoy your days. And if you wish to come back, for work, for sure. Thank you, staff. Thank you very much who are in presence and people who are online. All the trustees who have joined online, in person, thank you very much. And all the community members who have joined this committee. Thank you very much. And the last item is adjournment. We have Trustee Laskin and Trustee Didavidis. Anyone oppose? Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Right.
We had to keep our record intact.
Good night.